For tweaking the look of a model or scene, I like to use this specific saved layout. So I'm just going under Panels to Saved Layout and Hypershade Render Perspective. So you can see here we have a hypershade, our perspective view, and also our render view. So let's talk a little bit about the render view window. If I have a sphere in my scene, for instance, and I'm just going to add a light, just move that light over. In the render view window, I can actually do a software render of that light, see what that looks like on my sphere, or I can do an IPR render. IPR stands for Interactive Photorealistic Render. Now what this is going to do is allow you to quickly see changes that you make to a texture or a light. So tweaking the look that you want for a model is very fast. So let's go ahead and set that up. Just going to hit the IPR button, and you'll notice it says select a region to begin tuning. So I'm going to select a large region here. And now if I were to rotate my light around, notice that the light changes in the IPR render as well. If I were to change the color of the light, it's going to go to the attribute editor. Okay, you'll notice now we have a red light on our sphere. So just going to close that up. And you'll notice up here on the side it says IPR 5 megabytes. That's how much RAM is being used to generate this IPR. I'm just going to stop the IPR. And let's look at our hypershade. Now you'll notice the hypershade is divided into two tiers. We have an upper tier and a lower tier. The upper tier stores materials, textures, any utility nodes that are in your scene, as well as lights. So if I just click on the light tab here, there's our directional light that I've just added. Okay? Now if we go to the bottom tier here, you'll notice that the light is in the bottom tier as well. This is the work area. So this is where you're going to do any changes to any texture maps or lights or anything. They're all going to be done in this area here. I'm just going to clear this area with the eraser. Okay? And I just wanted to point out too, when you are working in the work area, sometimes it's nice to not actually have to look at this top tier. So what I'll do is I'll just hide it with this button here, this Show Bottom Tabs Only. This is top tabs only, this is both tabs, and this is the bottom tabs. Now let's go ahead and create a shading network. Just under the Create menu, I'm going to go to Materials. Let's choose Lambert. And I'm just going to assign it to the sphere by selecting the sphere and just right mouse button clicking Assign Material to Selection. Now I'm going to add a texture to this material. Just double click on the attribute editor, center the color channel here. I'm just going to map, and let's add a checker texture. Okay, so you'll notice we can move our nodes around. This is just with the left mouse button. What I like to do is just select one of our nodes and just graph the upstream connections, and that usually aligns everything really nicely in the hypershade. Now, the keys that you use in the perspective window here also work in the hypershade too. So I'm dollying in by using the Alt, left, and middle mouse button. I can track as well, just using the middle mouse button and the Alt key. So it offers you a lot of flexibility to get in real close or further away if you have a very large network. So let's talk about up and downstream connections. Upstream connection is basically whatever is on the left-hand side of the node that's selected. So I have the material node selected here, and what's on the left-hand side are these two nodes here. Downstream connection is what's on the right-hand side of what's selected. So if I were to graph downstream connections, you'll notice that the Lambert 2 shading group has shown up. Now the shading group is at the end of every network, shading network, and it needs to be there because Maya has to recognize the shading network as a legitimate group. Now what the shading group is a collection of the objects to be shaded by that particular network. So at render time, Maya just has a quick look at the shading group and says, oh, okay, these are the objects that need to have, the checkered texture on it. So this has to be at the end of every shading group, or excuse me, every shading network, in order for the renderer to recognize it as a legitimate network. So if we go ahead and graph what's upstream, you'll notice that the shading group is gone, and we can now see what's on the left-hand side of the Lambert material. Now, one of the reasons that it does get rid of the what was downstream is because I've turned on clear before graphing. So if you want to be able to hide something that's downstream while you graph whatever's upstream, you'll want to make sure that that flag is turned on. The next thing that we're going to talk about are light types. We have 5 different light types in Maya, and there's many ways that you can create them. One way is to go up into the Create menu, Lights, and you can choose one of these lights here. I'm just going to stow Maya, and let's just have a look at what some of the lights look like. So the ambient light is a non-directional light, and it's used to simulate scattered or reflected light. So it's really good as a secondary light source, and you can see it's really good as a wash. So you can change the color of the ambient light to give a scene a nice, if you wanted to convey a warmth scene, you can maybe change the color to an orange to just kind of give it a nice warm wash. The directional light, what this does is it simulates a distant light source. It has parallel rays, and the shadows are a little bit harsher with a directional light. Just the default shadows are a little bit harsher than some of the other lights. The point light, has light rays that emanate from a single point outwards in all direction. This type of a light is really good for simulating a light bulb or a candle. And you'll notice that the shadows here are just a little bit subtler than the directional light. And this is the spotlight. Now a spotlight has a cone of influence in a specific direction. It has a number of attributes on it that are special to that type of light. You can actually see this kind of cone shape back here, okay? And that's from the spotlight. And the last light that we have is an area light. And the area light is a 2D rectangular light that's used to simulate rectangular highlights. The size of this light and the closeness or farness it is to an object is going to control how bright or how large that highlight is. Now we're going to talk about light linking. I'm just going to clear the scene here. Go back to my layout, and I'm just going to create 2 spheres, and I'm just going to add a directional light. Okay, I'm just going to change this a little bit, point it down a little bit more. And I think I might add an ambient light as well. And just turn down the intensity a little bit. Intensity is another word for brightness. It's going to go to 0.7. Okay, and I'm just going to do a render. Okay, so you can see here, I'm just going to get in a little closer. We've got a nice wash from the ambient light, but we also have highlights here from our directional light. Now light linking, what that is sometimes you'll need to control which lights shine on which objects in your scene. And you're going to use light linking to do this. Now there are 2 ways that you can link lights to specific objects. One of them is through the relationship editor. So I'm just going to IPR this, okay, and select a region to begin tuning. And let's just go into Window, Relationship Editor, Light Linking. And you'll notice there's light-centric and object-centric. Light-centric means your lights will show up on the left-hand side of the editor. Object-centric means your objects will show up on the left-hand side of the editor. So I'm just going to choose light-centric. Okay, so here are our lights on the left-hand side. And if we just select them, you'll notice, for instance, the directional light is linked to both of the spheres here. Okay, so when unlinking a light to an object using the relationship editor, just click on the object that you want to unlink it to on the right-hand side. So if we just do this, you'll notice that the directional light is now not linked to the NURB sphere 2, and you'll notice the lights change a little bit here. Okay, so it's linked, unlinked, linked, unlinked. Same for NURB sphere 1. Okay, so it's almost like a toggle switch. It's very easy to use. The other way that you can link lights together is by using a menu action, the Make Light Links and Break Light Links. So I'm just going to close up the relationship editor. Okay, and so right now our directional light is linked to both of our objects. If we wanted to unlink it from, let's say, the sphere here, what we'll do is we'll select the light, we'll select the object that we're interested in, so either unlinking or linking, and then we're going to go into the rendering menu set, and just under lighting shading, we're going to break the light link. Okay, and you'll notice how that changed right here. Okay, so now, whoops, excuse me. So now it's linked back up again. So it's really simple. You just pick the light, you pick the object that you're interested in, and then just go up to Make Light Links, Break Light Links. Now this is actually very handy if you have one light that you want to either link or unlink in a scene, very, very heavy scene with a lot of geometry. It just allows you to visually see the object and see the light and just make or break that connection. I'm just going to deselect that for 1 sec, close down the IPR here, and just select that directional light and go to the attribute editor. I want to point out a flag that's on all lights by default, and it's the Illuminates by default flag. So when you first create a light, all objects are illuminated by all lights. Now if I turn this off, that means that that specific light is not going to illuminate all objects unless I go ahead and link it up. With regards to the lights in Mental Ray for Maya, all the Maya lights are supported and work the same. The ambient, directional, point, and spotlight, including the intensity curves on the spotlight, are all rendered exactly as they would in Maya, in Mental Ray for Maya. The only light that's not supported is the Maya area light. Now, in order to get a Mental Ray for Maya light, what you're going to need to do is either create a spotlight or a point light. So let's grab a point light and go to the attribute editor of the point light, and we'll just come down into the area light section and we'll just turn that on. Okay, so now when you're rendering with Mental Ray for Maya and you want an area light, you'll just have to turn this on, and if we just get in a little close, you can see the direction that the light is going to come. You can see it's coming down the negative Z axis here. Okay, and there's also different types or shapes of area lights that you can render. So rectangular, disc, sphere, cylindrical, and user. Sampling, what the sampling is going to do is basically it's the number of sampled points emitted from the light. So values greater than 3 are going to reduce graininess. Low level, if this is greater than 1, then the low sampling values will be used. So this affects reflections and refractions. Now with regards to the low sampling, when you start increasing these values, that's going to help with the grainy edges. So if the low level value is greater than 1, then this will actually be used as the minimum amount of sampling. And this visible option here, if we turn this on, what that means is that the light is going to render. Okay, so the light is actually going to be visible in the render, which is kind of nice because, like, let's say for instance you wanted a fluorescent tubing light what you could do is just use the mental ray cylindrical area light, and then you get that kind of fluorescent tubing effect.